My sister spent everything on her wedding and then said I ruined her life because I didn't stop her. My wedding dress smelled like cheap steamed fabric and panic, and I kept tugging at the sleeves like I could pull myself back into my normal life if I tried hard enough. Delaney, that's me, standing in a rented hall with folding chairs and a buffet my parents paid for, telling myself simple didn't mean sad. It didn't mean sad. It meant we weren't going to start a marriage by setting money on fire. That was the whole point. My husband squeezed my hand and whispered, "We did it," like we'd survived something together. I smiled because I meant it, and because the photographer kept hovering like a hungry bird. The ceremony was small on purpose. A few friends, a few family members, and the kind of decorations you can store in a closet later without feeling stupid. I wore a dress that cost less than what my sister spent on her hair every month. Okay, I might be exaggerating a tiny bit, but only because her hair always looked like it belonged on someone with a trust fund. My parents covered the food and the little religious ceremony piece, and my husband and I paid for everything else. I was proud of us. I was also so busy being proud that I didn't notice my sister rolling her eyes at my centerpieces. I found out later because people can't keep anything to themselves. A cousin pulled me aside a week after the wedding and said, "I didn't want to tell you, but she was being kind of loud." Then my aunt, the one who treats gossip like it's oxygen, told me my sister had been making jokes about my budget wedding. Apparently, she'd pointed at the dessert table and said, "So this is what being responsible looks like," with that fake smile people use when they're trying to cut you without leaving a mark. I should have confronted her right away. No, I shouldn't have, I know. You know. But I wanted to. I had fantasies of grabbing the microphone and doing a whole dramatic speech like I was in a reality show. Instead, I did what I always do when I'm cornered. I swallowed it, told myself she was jealous, and went back to building my little newlywed life. Here's the thing my parents never said out loud, but everyone in our family knew. They'd kept a savings account for each of us since we were kids. Not some magical pile of money, just a steady, careful little fund they added to when they could. My parents weren't rich. They were the kind of we plan ahead people. My mother used coupons like it was a sport. My father would fix something himself before he'd pay someone else. They saved for our future like it was a promise. Before the wedding, my parents sat me down and said, "Use what you need. The rest can stay there for a house or an emergency." I used a small chunk because, again, we didn't want to start our marriage by setting money on fire. And they kept the rest, which felt normal because they'd been holding that money for years. And I trusted them. My sister sat at my wedding like she was watching someone else's boring movie. I didn't see it then. I see it now, though, like a little warning light. She didn't clap that hard. She didn't cry. She didn't whisper, "You look beautiful." She looked around like she was taking notes on what not to do. Afterward, she posted one vague photo on a social media app with a caption that said something like "Family Day." No congratulations. No tag, nothing. Yes, it bothered me. Yes, I pretended it didn't. A few days later, my aunt told my sister, with the energy of someone lighting a match near gasoline, that I barely touched my savings money. I didn't even know she'd said it. I wasn't there. But it traveled like everything does in our family. Fast, twisted, and with extra seasoning. My sister heard that and somehow turned it into, they didn't give her any money at all. Like my parents had just ignored me, skipped my wedding, and tossed me into the street. It made no sense. But my sister has this special talent where she believes whatever story makes her the victim. She clung to that version like it was a life raft, and nobody corrected her because nobody wanted the drama, including me, which, yes, I regret. 6 months after my wedding, my sister had hers. And when I say hers was big, I mean it was the kind of wedding where you walk in and immediately know someone's credit card is crying. She picked a venue that looked like a fancy building from the outside and a money pit from the inside. There were lights. There was a dessert table that could have fed a small town. There were party favors that I'm sure got thrown away by half the guests before they even got home. My sister wore a dress that looked like it weighed more than her personality, which, trust me, is saying something. My parents paid for it. They used the entire savings meant for her. Every bit. They did it because they love her, and because she had been talking about her dream wedding since she was a teenager. I watched my mother smile through stress. I watched my father do that tight jaw thing he does when he's trying not to think about numbers. I told myself it wasn't my business. I also told myself it wasn't my problem, which was technically true. Emotionally, it was like watching someone you love walk into a wall. Her husband didn't contribute. Not because he couldn't, necessarily, but because he wouldn't. He'd bounced between jobs like he was allergic to staying put. He'd get hired, complain about the schedule, complain about the manager, complain about the customers, and then he'd be gone. Sometimes he got fired, sometimes he quit, and every time he acted like the world was the one failing him. At the wedding, he made a speech about how he was going to build something. He said it like a promise. He also said it like my sister owed him applause for having the thought. People clapped because people clap when they're trapped in a room with cake. I clapped too because I'm not a monster, but I remember thinking, build what? Spoiler, he built nothing, nothing at all. After they got married, my sister tried to run her own little business making bags and shoes. I'm not going to say it was bad because that sounds mean, and honestly, she did put effort into it. But the quality didn't match the price. The photos were cute. The product was not. She'd brag about being an entrepreneur like that automatically meant money would fall into her lap. Meanwhile, she was barely selling anything, and her husband was at home playing online games and streaming, which basically meant he sat on the couch and talked to a handful of strangers while my sister worked her job, cooked, cleaned, and tried to keep the lights on. When I visited, the apartment always smelled like stale snacks and defeat. His gaming setup took up more space than their dining table. I'd step over cords like I was navigating a trap. My sister would greet me with this tight smile, and then she'd start complaining the second her husband wasn't listening. He's just stressed, she'd say. He's working on something. I'd look at her and want to shake her. I didn't. I smiled, because apparently my personality is avoidance. He never lifted a finger around the house. If there were dishes in the sink, he walked past them. If the trash was full, he pushed it down. If my sister asked him to help, he'd sigh like she'd asked him to move a mountain, and then he'd slide in little comments, like tiny drops of poison. Your parents don't respect me, he'd say. They think I'm beneath them. Or, your sister always gets the good stuff. They help her and leave you to struggle. He'd say it like he was protecting her, like he was the only one who saw the truth. My sister ate it up. Every time my parents tried to give her advice, she took it as an attack. If my mother said, maybe you should put some money aside, my sister heard, you're failing. If my father said, he needs to get a job, my sister heard, we hate your husband. She'd defend him like he was a wounded animal, and he'd sit there smug and quiet, letting her do it. A year and a half after her wedding, I got pregnant. Not planned exactly, but not a shock either. My husband and I had been doing the whole, if it happens thing, which is basically a fancy way of saying we weren't trying that hard to prevent it. When I saw the test, my hands shook. I laughed and cried at the same time in the bathroom like a cliche. Then I sat on the floor and stared at the wall for a long time because suddenly everything felt huge. Also because I was scared. I don't talk about that part enough. People act like pregnancy automatically turns you into a glowing goddess. It doesn't. Sometimes it turns you into a nervous raccoon. Around that same time, my husband got a promotion. Nothing glamorous, but it meant more responsibility and better pay. It also meant he'd be working at another location on the other side of town, closer to neighborhoods with better schools and less of that constant siren noise. We'd been renting for years, and we'd always said we'd buy when it made sense. Suddenly, it made sense. So I called my parents and asked about the rest of my savings money. Not because we couldn't do it without it, but because the truth is, buying a house in this country feels like trying to climb a wall coated in oil. Every little bit helps. My parents were happy. My mother cried. My father started talking about interest rates like he was about to run for office. They transferred the money, and with that plus our own savings, we put a down payment on a house in a good area. We signed the papers. We got the keys. I stood in the empty living room and pressed my palm against the wall like I needed to prove it was real. We posted about it on a social media app, because that's what people do, and because I was excited and I wanted my friends to know. I also posted about the pregnancy because I was excited and I wanted to feel normal about it. 2 announcements one day, like I was competing for attention. I wasn't. I just wanted to share. But my sister absolutely took it like a personal insult. Within an hour, my phone lit up like it was on fire. My sister called. I answered because I'm stupid. Her voice was sharp, already loud, already angry. So you had money the whole time, she said. Not, congrats. Not, I'm happy for you. Just accusation, right out of the gate. I blinked and said, what are you talking about? The savings, she snapped. You act like you're so responsible. But you just got handed money and didn't tell me. You let me think. She cut herself off like she'd almost admitted something. Then she barreled forward. You let me look stupid. You let everyone think I blew all my money while you were secretly sitting on yours. I said, I didn't let you think anything. Nobody stopped you from saving. That's when she lost it. She started yelling about how I should have warned her, like I was supposed to call her and say, "Hey, just in case you're about to spend every cent on a wedding, maybe don't." She said I had an obligation to guide her, to advise her, to save her from herself. Her husband yelled in the background, something about favoritism and how my parents always coddled me. I could hear him like a barking dog. It made my skin crawl. I tried to explain, but she wasn't listening. She was rewriting history in real time. She said my parents never gave me money for my wedding, like I'd been some neglected orphan. She said I kept my savings secret on purpose so she'd waste hers and fail. She said I enjoyed watching her struggle. She said so many things so fast that I couldn't even grab one to argue with. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. Finally, I said, "I'm not doing this." And I hung up. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I stared at my phone like it had betrayed me. It kind of did. But also, it was just a phone. The betrayal was a family specialty. The messages started immediately. Long paragraphs, short insults, a mix of both. She called me fake. She called me selfish. She called me a liar. She said I was playing innocent. She demanded an apology for making her look dumb. I didn't even know what she wanted me to apologize for. For existing? For not being her financial babysitter? I blocked her. Then she started using other numbers, friends, random apps that let you generate a different number. It was like she had turned harassing me into a hobby. I'd be at work, trying to focus on spreadsheets, and my phone would buzz with a new message that made my stomach drop. I'd be lying in bed next to my husband, trying to sleep, and I'd see my screen light up, and I'd feel my whole body tense. After a few days, I snapped. I sent one message back that was too harsh. I told her she wasn't welcome in my life if she kept acting like this. I told her she wasn't going to have access to my kid if she couldn't treat me like a human being. I regret the wording, not the boundary. The boundary needed to happen. The wording was a mess. I was a mess. She took that message and ran with it. Suddenly, she was the victim again. She told people I was threatening to keep her nephew away. She said I was weaponizing my pregnancy. She said I was cruel. She said I was punishing her for being honest. Meanwhile, she kept texting me, calling me names, accusing me of sabotaging her life. The hypocrisy could have been funny if it wasn't making me cry in my car after work. Eventually, I told my parents. I didn't want to. I felt like a tattletale. I felt childish. But I also felt like I was carrying a tiny human inside me, and I couldn't keep taking emotional punches like it was normal. My mother tried to minimize it at first. She said, "She's just stressed." She said, "You know how she gets." She said, "Don't take it personally." I wanted to scream, how do I not take it personally when she's literally attacking me? My father, on the other hand, got angry. He didn't do the soft thing. He did the, "I'm calling her right now" thing. They confronted her. My sister denied it at first. Then, when my father started reading her messages out loud, she got quiet. Then she got defensive. Then she got furious. She said it was between sisters and my parents had no right to interfere. My father said, "When one sister is harassing the other, it becomes my business." My mother tried to smooth it over. My father didn't let her. He told my sister she was acting entitled and ridiculous. He told her her financial issues were her responsibility. He told her she didn't get to blame me for her choices. My sister exploded. She accused them of hating her husband. She accused them of wanting her to marry someone rich. She said they'd always favored me. My parents pointed out that my husband wasn't rich. He just worked, and that the difference wasn't money, it was effort. My sister didn't want to hear that. She suddenly said she never should have accepted the savings money at all, that my parents used money to control her, like she was a trained animal, like they'd been pulling strings this whole time. It was honestly breathtaking. I sat there listening to the aftermath and thinking, how did we grow up in the same house? After that call, she went quiet for a couple of weeks. Not peaceful quiet, the kind where you can feel someone plotting. I started to relax a little. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I started letting myself enjoy being pregnant, at least in small moments, like when my husband rested his hand on my stomach and smiled like he couldn't believe it either. Then 3 weeks later, we decided to do a combined little housewarming and pregnancy celebration. Not a huge party, just some close friends and family. We wanted to show people the house. We wanted to eat food and pretend life was normal. We didn't invite my sister. That felt obvious. My parents came. My mother kept glancing at me like she was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Someone posted pictures on a social media app, of course, and my sister saw them. That evening, she threw her own party. Same day, same time. She posted photos with captions about real family and people who actually show up. She sent some of the photos directly to my mother. It was like she was daring my mother to pick a side. My mother cried. My father got angry. I got tired. Like bone-deep tired. The kind where you want to lie on the floor and let the world spin without you. My father, in one of his righteous moods, texted my sister from his own phone and said if she hated the savings money so much, she could start paying it back. He threw out a number that made me choke when my mother told me. More than $100,000 over the years between her education and her wedding. My mother immediately tried to correct him, like, it's not exactly that. My father said, it's close enough. My sister didn't answer right away, which, honestly, scared me more than her yelling. Silence means she's crafting a story. A few days later, she started posting again. Sometimes it was vague quotes about betrayal. Sometimes it was pointed jabs about favoritism. Sometimes it was performative pain about being kept from family. My aunt would forward me screenshots like she was delivering evidence. Distant relatives would message asking if everything was okay. I stopped explaining. I stopped even reading them. I just kept living. At my own gathering, a cousin said, I saw something. Is everything fine? In front of a couple other people, like it was casual, like my family drama was a cute topic at a party. I smiled through it. I lied through it. I said, oh, she's just stressed. Meanwhile, inside, I felt like I was being peeled open. I spent that night crying in the shower so my husband wouldn't hear me. Then I cried again in bed anyway because he noticed. He said, I'm not letting her poison this. And I knew what he meant. He wasn't going to let my sister turn my pregnancy into a battlefield. The stress started messing with me. I stopped sleeping. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and scroll through her posts like I was punishing myself. I'd read the comments. I'd look at who liked them. I'd feel my throat tighten. I'd feel my hands go cold. I'd say, I'm done. And then I'd look again 10 minutes later. Yes, I know, it was unhealthy. It also felt impossible to stop, like if I didn't watch it, it would somehow get worse. My mother called me crying one afternoon and asked me to be the bigger person. She said, she's your sister. She said, maybe you can just talk to her. I said, talk to her about what? Her fantasy that I ruined her life by buying a house? My mother said, she's hurt. I said, so am I. My voice cracked, and then I got angry, because I hate crying when I'm trying to be firm. It feels like losing. I told my mother I wasn't apologizing for something I didn't do. I told her my sister wasn't meeting the baby until she stopped acting like I was her enemy. My mother got quiet. She didn't agree. She didn't fight. She just sounded sad, which somehow made me feel worse. Like I was the one causing pain, even though my sister was the one throwing knives. A few weeks later, my sister showed up at my parents' place unannounced. She demanded a conversation. She was furious about my father demanding she repay the money. She said it was proof they were controlling her. She said they wouldn't ask me to repay anything, so obviously they favored me. My parents tried to explain, calmly, that we both got the same amount, we just used it differently. That was the truth. I used a portion and saved the rest. She used every bit. That's not favoritism. That's choices. My sister screamed anyway. She talked about a lifetime of being second. She listed every little grievance she could dig up. Even stuff from when we were kids, like the time I got a new backpack and she didn't. She forgot the part where hers was new the year before. Details never mattered when she was in victim mode. My father kept saying, you made your choices. My mother kept saying, please don't yell. My sister kept yelling. At some point, she said, fine, I'll pay it back, every cent. And when I pay the last penny, I'm done. I'm never speaking to you again. She said it like it was a threat, like my parents would collapse from grief. My father said, that's your choice. That made her even angrier. She started sending payments, irregular and dramatic. The first few months, she paid the same amount, right on time, like she was proving a point. Then the payments got smaller, then they got late. Then she skipped one and sent a long message blaming my parents for her stress. Then her husband messaged my father, accusing him of financial abuse. Financial abuse. After a few more sporadic payments, she stopped entirely. My father sent one final message. Consider the debt forgiven, but the boundary stays. My sister never acknowledged it. My mother wanted closure, but my father refused. We're done chasing, he said. The audacity would have been impressive if it wasn't so exhausting. In the middle of all this, I was still pregnant. Life didn't pause. I still worked. I still went to appointments. I still tried to eat vegetables. I still had days where I felt excited and days where I felt like I'd made a huge mistake bringing a child into this mess. My husband tried to shield me, but he also had his own limit. One night, after I'd spent an hour crying because my sister posted another vague betrayal caption, he said, "If she shows up here, I'm calling the police." He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a boundary, like, "We're not doing this." I didn't want it to come to that. I didn't want police involved. I didn't want court. I didn't want any of the big, scary things that make family drama feel like it's crossing into something else. I wanted it to stay in that miserable, normal zone of, we're fighting and it sucks. But I also didn't want my sister showing up and screaming at my door when I was 8 months pregnant. So when she started threatening to show up and say what she had to say, my husband and I went to the local police station and asked what we could do. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some movie scene. It was me sitting in a plastic chair, holding a folder of screenshots, feeling like the world's biggest loser. The officer told us we could file a report about harassment and we could request a no-contact order if it escalated. He looked tired. He looked like he'd seen this exact thing 1,000 times. It made me feel both comforted and devastated. Comforted because we weren't crazy. We didn't file anything that day. I wasn't ready. I kept hoping it would burn out on its own. My sister wasn't physically hurting me. She was just poisoning everything. And my family kept acting like emotional poisoning was something I should tolerate because that's how she is. The baby came in a blur of exhaustion and relief. The labor was long. I cursed. I cried. I made a joke at one point about how I was never doing this again, and my husband laughed and then immediately apologized because laughing felt wrong in the moment. When they handed me my baby, I felt like my whole body reset. Like the world narrowed down to this tiny person, and everything else became background noise. For a few days, I didn't think about my sister. I didn't check my phone. I didn't care what she was posting. I was too busy learning how to survive on no sleep and snack crumbs. My parents came to meet the baby. My mother cried again. My father looked like he was trying not to cry and failing. It was sweet. It was normal. It almost made me forget. Then my cousin messaged me and said my sister had posted something about being kept away from family. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. People aren't stupid. She said something about watching someone take everything and still act like the victim. I felt that cold rush again, like my body recognized danger. My husband took my phone, read the message, and set it down. He said, "She's not coming near this baby until she stops." He said it so calmly that it made me cry again, because I realized how much I needed someone to be calm when I couldn't. A couple weeks later, my sister's husband left. I didn't hear it from her. Of course I didn't. I heard it from my aunt, because my aunt can smell drama like a shark smells blood. She called me and said, "Well, guess what happened?" Like she was sharing a fun story. I said, "I'm holding a newborn, can you not?" She ignored me. She said my sister's husband had moved on and my sister was finally waking up. She said my sister was devastated. Not because she missed him as a person, but because she still kept insisting he was just taking space and coming back. My aunt said my sister felt betrayed anyway, like he'd promised her a different ending. I almost laughed. Almost. Because how many times had my sister betrayed other people emotionally and called it honesty? My sister got a part-time job. Her business had quietly died months before, another dream abandoned when reality demanded actual work. She stopped paying my parents back. She sent them another long message, blaming them for everything. My parents were tired. They were worn down. My mother started talking about how she just wanted peace. My father started talking about how he was done being manipulated. They disagreed, gently, but it was there. The crack. My sister didn't reach out to me directly. Instead, she told a cousin, "Tell her I don't need to know that baby." Like it was her choice. Like she was rejecting us, not the other way around. The cousin told me awkwardly, like she was delivering a package. I felt this weird mix of relief and grief. Relief because I didn't want her near my child. Grief because, deep down, some part of me still wanted my sister to just be normal for once. The months passed. The baby grew. My body healed. My husband and I settled into that messy new parent routine where you forget what day it is and you celebrate tiny wins like the baby slept 3 hours. My sister kept posting. Sometimes it was vague. Sometimes it was pointed. She'd say things about being excluded and people who think they're better. It was like she needed a stage even when the audience was exhausted. My mother tried to push reconciliation again when the baby was a few months old. She said, "What if you just let her see the baby once, supervised, at our house?" I stared at her and said, "Why is the solution always me giving her what she wants?" My mother looked offended. Then she looked sad. Then she looked guilty. I softened, because I'm still me. I said, I'm not punishing her. I'm protecting my kid. My mother whispered, I know. But she didn't act like she knew. She kept hoping my sister would become someone else. One night, after the baby finally fell asleep, I sat on the couch with my husband and told him the truth I'd been avoiding. I didn't think my sister was ever going to admit she was wrong. I didn't think she was ever going to stop being resentful. She might calm down. She might move on. But she would always carry this story where I was the villain. And maybe that was fine. Maybe I didn't need her approval. Maybe I didn't need to keep bleeding for a relationship that only existed when I was willing to be the punching bag. A year after the baby was born, my sister showed up at my parents' house again. This time she didn't scream. This time she cried. My mother called me after and said, she's finally accepting he's not coming back. I said, good. He left months ago. My mother said, yes, but she kept saying he was just taking space. Now she's admitting it's over. I could hear the hope in her voice. It made my stomach twist. My sister told my parents she wanted to start over. My father said, with what, reality? My mother shushed him. My sister said she'd been manipulated. She said she'd been stressed. She said she'd been in a dark place. She didn't say, I was wrong. She didn't say, I hurt you. She didn't say my name. She talked around it like she was allergic to accountability. Still, my mother wanted to believe it. My father stayed guarded. A week later, my sister messaged me for the first time since the baby was born. The message was short, which is how I knew it wasn't sincere. It said, can we talk? No apology, no acknowledgement, just a request, like I owed her access to my life. I stared at it for a long time. I felt anger. I felt sadness. I felt this tired, hollow thing. I also felt something else. Clarity. I typed back, not right now. Then I turned my phone off. Yes, I turned it off. It worked. She didn't take that well. She started sending messages again, not as intense as before, but still full of little digs. Must be nice to be perfect. Must be nice to have everything. The old script. I didn't respond. I let the silence do the work. Eventually, my father asked me to come over without the baby. He said he wanted to talk, just us. When I got there, my sister was there too. My mother had set it up. Of course she had. I wanted to leave. My father gave me a look that said, stay. So I stayed. And yes, I was furious. I'm still furious thinking about it. My sister started crying immediately. She said she felt abandoned. She said she felt betrayed. She said she'd been trying. I waited. I waited for the part where she would say she was sorry. She never did. Instead, she said, you could have told me. Again, that phrase. Like I'd hidden some treasure map from her. I finally snapped. Not screaming. Not throwing things, just snapping in that quiet way where your voice goes flat and you realize you don't care how you sound anymore. I said, I didn't owe you a warning. I didn't owe you a lesson. You're not my child. You're my sister. She flinched like I'd slapped her. My mother started to cry. My father stared at my sister like he was seeing her for the first time. My sister said, so you think you're better than me? I said, no. I think I'm tired of being your excuse. The room went silent. Even my mother stopped making noise for a second. My sister looked stunned. Then she got angry. Because anger is her comfort zone. She said I was cold. She said I was cruel. She said I was punishing her. She said I was keeping her from family. My father told her to stop. My sister turned on him, accusing him of loving me more. My father said, I love you both. I'm just not willing to lie anymore. That was the closest we ever got to honesty in our family. After that meeting, things didn't magically fix themselves. My sister didn't transform into a reasonable person. My mother didn't stop hoping. My father didn't stop being tired. But something shifted in me. I stopped feeling like I had to explain myself to every relative who saw a vague post. I stopped chasing the idea of a sister who would clap at my happiness without feeling personally attacked. My sister kept her distance for a while. She told people she was taking space. She told them I was dramatic. She told them she was protecting her peace. I let her. Because honestly, if she wanted peace, she could have it. Far away from me. By my kid's second birthday, I ran into my sister at a grocery store. Not a cute movie moment. Not slow motion. Just me pushing a cart with a tired toddler and her standing near the frozen foods, staring at me like she wasn't sure if she should speak. My kid waved at her, because my kid waves at everybody. My sister's face did something complicated. She lifted her hand halfway like she might wave back, then dropped it. I didn't approach her. I didn't do a speech. I didn't do a dramatic stare down. I just nodded once and kept walking. My heart was pounding, but my body kept moving. It felt like choosing myself in real time. It also felt like grief. Both can exist. Don't let anyone tell you they can't. Later that night, my mother called and said, "Did you see her today?" I said, "Yes." My mother said, "Did you talk?" I said, "No." My mother sounded disappointed. I said, "Mom, I'm not doing the cycle anymore." My mother sighed like she wanted to argue. Then she said quietly, "I understand." I don't know if she did, but it was the first time she didn't push. My sister never held my child. She saw my kid exactly once at that disastrous dinner, but she never got close. Not then, not after. She tells people she was kept away. She posts about family betrayal sometimes when she's having a rough week. My aunt still forwards me screenshots like she's doing me a service. I've learned to mute people and let some relationships fade. My parents are still my parents. My mother still aches for a picture-perfect family that doesn't exist. My father still gets angry when he thinks about how much energy my sister stole from all of us. I still feel flashes of sadness when I see sisters laughing together in a coffee shop. Like it's the most normal thing in the world. I still have moments where I wonder if I could have done something different. Then I remember the truth. She wanted a villain. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. And when I tuck my kid into bed and listen to that soft little breathing, I feel this stubborn, quiet certainty that I did the right thing. Not the easy thing. Not the keep everyone happy thing. The right thing. The thing that let my home stay a home, not a stage for someone else's resentment. Not long after that grocery store run-in, my sister pulled a move that still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. My mother called me and said, in that too bright voice she uses when she's trying to sell me on something, "We're doing a little dinner this weekend. Just us. Your father, me, you, the baby." And then she paused, like she was waiting for me to fill in the missing piece. I said, "Okay." She said, "And your sister is coming too." I swear my whole body went cold. I said, "No." My mother immediately started with the soft guilt. "She's been lonely," she said. "She's not with him anymore," she said. "She just wants to see you," she said. She didn't say the baby out loud, but it was hovering in the air like a perfume. I said, "I already told you the rule. No apology, no access." My mother said, "She'll behave." I said, "That's not an apology." My mother said, "Can you just try for me?" And here's the ugly truth. I did. Not because I believed it would end well, but because I was exhausted from being the villain in her story, and I wanted to stop feeling like I was making my mother suffer. Yes, I know, I caved. You can judge me. I judge me. So I showed up at my parents' house with my kid and a knot in my stomach. My father looked nervous. My mother looked hopeful. My sister walked in 10 minutes late like she was arriving at an event she was doing us a favor by attending. She didn't even look at me at first. She went straight to my kid with this sugary voice and said, "Hi, sweetie," like we were best friends and nothing had happened. I stepped between them. Not dramatic, not pushing, just stepping. I said, "Hi." She finally looked at me. Her eyes flicked over my face like she was scanning for weakness. Then she smiled and said, "So you're still mad?" I said, "You still haven't apologized." She laughed. Actually laughed. "For what?" she said. "For being honest? For getting upset when I got treated like garbage?" My father cleared his throat and said her name like a warning. My mother said, "Let's just have dinner." My sister rolled her eyes and said, "Fine, I'm not here to fight." Then she reached toward my kid again. I said, "Don't." She froze, like she couldn't believe I'd said it out loud in front of our parents. "Seriously?" she snapped. "You're still doing this?" I said, "You can meet the baby when you can talk to me without acting like I robbed you." My sister's face changed fast. That smile disappeared. Her voice got sharper. "You did rob me," she said. "You robbed me of the chance to do things the right way. You kept your little secret and watched me drown." I felt my hands start to shake. I said, "I didn't keep anything secret. You never asked. You assumed." She took a step closer, like she was trying to intimidate me in my parents' kitchen. "You're always the good one," she said, loud enough that my kid flinched. "You always get to be the good one, and I'm always the screw-up. You like that." I wish I could say I handled it with dignity. I didn't. I snapped back. "I like being left alone. That's what I like. I like not being blamed for your choices." My mother gasped like I'd cursed. My father's jaw tightened. My sister started crying instantly, like a switch flipped, and she turned to my mother and said, "See? She hates me." Then she pointed at my kid like that tiny person was a prop. and she's using the baby to punish me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did this quiet, shaking laugh and said, "You are exhausting." And I hate that I said it because it was mean. It was also true. My father stepped in between us and said, "Enough." My sister tried to keep going, but my father cut her off and told her to leave. She stared at him like he'd slapped her. Then she started yelling at him too, calling him unfair, calling him cold, calling him exactly what her ex used to call him in those messages. My mother begged her to calm down. My sister grabbed her coat and stormed out, and right before she slammed the door, she shouted, "Enjoy your perfect little life." My kids started crying. My mother started crying. I stood there holding my kid and thinking, this is the dinner she promised would be peaceful. Spoiler, there was no dinner. On the drive home, my husband kept one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on my knee, like he was anchoring me. He didn't even ask what happened because he already knew. He said, "We're not doing that again." I nodded, even though my chest hurt like I'd swallowed glass. The next day, my mother sent me a long message about how everyone is hurting and families make mistakes, and we need to heal. My father sent a shorter message that said, "You did the right thing." I stared at both messages for a long time. It felt like choosing between them even though it shouldn't have. I wrote back to my mother, "I'm not healing by letting her keep cutting me." My mother didn't respond for hours. When she did, she just sent a heart. A heart. Like I was a distant friend and not her daughter. After that, my sister escalated in a more sneaky way. She stopped the obvious screaming and started playing the concerned victim. She messaged relatives and told them she was worried about me. She told them I was isolating myself. She told them my husband was controlling. Because obviously, if a woman sets a boundary, a man must be behind it. That's how my sister's brain works. Suddenly, I had cousins texting me like, "Are you okay?" and "Just checking in," and "We're here if you need anything." I wanted to ask, were you here when she was harassing me for months? But I didn't. Because I'm still allergic to conflict, apparently. It got worse when my sister started showing up in places where she knew I'd be. Not every day. Not like a stalker movie. Just enough to make me tense. Once she appeared in the parking lot of my work right as I was leaving. I saw her leaning against her car like she was in a dramatic photo shoot. My stomach dropped. I locked my doors and sat there, watching her in the mirror, waiting for her to leave. She didn't. She walked up to my car and tapped on the window. I didn't roll it down. I cracked it like an inch because I'm not an idiot. She leaned in and smiled, fake sweet. "I just want to talk," she said. I said, "Not here." She said, "Then where?" I said, "Not at all." She laughed, like I was being cute. Then she said, "Quiet. You can't keep hiding forever." I felt my throat tighten. I said, "If you keep showing up like this, I'm going to file a report." Her smile slipped. She said, "Wow," like I was threatening to call the army. Then she backed away and raised her hands in this dramatic surrender. "Fine," she said. "I'll leave you alone." She walked back to her car and drove off, and I sat there shaking like I'd just run a mile. That night, my husband and I sat at the kitchen table and made a boring adult plan. If she showed up again, we were documenting it. If she contacted my workplace, we were documenting it. If she tried to come to our house, we were calling the police. Not to be dramatic, not to punish her, just to make it clear, we weren't playing games. A week later, she tried a different angle. Money. My mother called and said my sister was struggling and needed help. I said, "Help how?" My mother said, "Just a loan. Something small." I asked how small. My mother gave a number that made me laugh because it wasn't small. It was, "I can't pay my rent and also I want to keep living like I'm not broke." Small. My mother said, "She'll pay it back." I said, "Like she paid you back?" My mother went silent. My father called me later and said my mother had asked him too, and he'd said no. He sounded tired, like his whole body had become one long sigh. He said, "She's looking for someone to rescue her again." I said, "I'm not doing it." My father said, "Good." Then he added quieter, "Your mother is going to try anyway." And of course he was right. My mother kept bringing it up. "It's just one time," she said. "She's your sister," she said. "You're doing well," she said. I wanted to scream. I'm doing well because I'm not giving away my stability every time someone throws a tantrum. But instead I said, "I have a baby. I have a mortgage. I have bills. I'm not a bank." My mother cried and said, "So you're going to let her fail?" And that sentence hit me like a slap because it was exactly the emotional trap my sister had been setting for years. If I don't save her, I'm cruel. If I do save her, she learns nothing and I keep bleeding. I said, "She's not failing because of me." My mother said, But you could help, I said. And she could work. My mother got quiet again, like I'd offended her. Then she said, I don't recognize you. That sentence did more damage than she probably intended. I sat there with tears in my eyes and said, maybe you're finally seeing me. After that, I pulled back from my mother for a while. Not cutting her off, not dramatic. Just less. Less calls, less visits, less sharing. Because I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. My mother wasn't just enabling my sister. She was using me to keep the peace. She was trying to sacrifice me, softly, with a smile, because it was easier than dealing with my sister's rage. My husband noticed and said, you're allowed to be mad at her. I said, I'm not mad, I'm just tired. He said, that's mad. He was right. Annoying, but right. Over the following months, my sister kept posting. It was the same cycle in different outfits. Betrayal quotes, vague captions, little jabs meant for me but aimed at anyone watching. My aunt still tried to forward screenshots like she was doing me a service. I kept saying, please stop, until she finally did. When my kid was old enough to walk, my sister tried a new move. She bought gifts and sent them through my mother. Stuffed animals, little outfits, toys. My mother would show up with a bag and say, she just wanted the baby to have this. And my heart would do this annoying thing where it softened, because seeing a little sweater makes you think maybe someone is trying. But then I'd remember, gifts aren't accountability. Gifts are a shortcut. I told my mother I wasn't accepting anything unless my sister could speak to me directly and say, in plain words, I'm sorry. My mother said, that's too harsh. I said, it's basic. My mother sighed and said, you're making it hard. I said, she made it hard. My mother stopped bringing the gifts. I knew she was still giving them to my sister, telling her I was not ready. Eventually, even that stopped. My sister either gave up or found other targets for her gestures. My sister probably told herself that meant I was petty. I let her. I didn't have the energy to correct the story she'd already decided to live in. The funniest part, in a dark way, is that my sister never stopped measuring everything against me. If my husband got a raise, she called it unfair. If I posted a photo of my kid at a playground, she called it showing off. If my parents came to my house for a birthday, she called it favoritism. There was no winning. There was only stepping out of the game. The day it finally clicked for me was weirdly small. My kid spilled juice on the floor and I cleaned it up without thinking, and I realized I wasn't tense. I wasn't waiting for a message. I wasn't bracing for another family explosion. I was just living. And I thought, oh, this is what peace feels like. It wasn't glamorous. It was sticky floor and laundry and a half-eaten snack. It was normal, and it was mine. A while after that, my father invited me to get coffee with him. Just us, like he used to when I was a teenager, and he'd take me to a little coffee shop to talk when my mother and sister were fighting. We sat outside, and he looked older than I remembered. He said, I'm sorry I didn't stop this earlier. I said, you tried. He shook his head. I tried late, he said. Your mother thought keeping the peace meant keeping her calm. I should have told your sister no more, years ago. I didn't even know what to do with that. I felt angry on his behalf and sad on my own behalf and relieved that someone was saying the truth out loud. I said, I don't want to hate her. My father said, you don't have to hate her, you just don't have to be her target. Then he looked at me and said, promise me you won't let anyone make your kid responsible for someone else's feelings. And I promised, because I knew exactly what he meant. By the time we got to the point where I could think about my sister without my chest tightening, she'd moved on to a new relationship. I found out because my aunt told my mother, and my mother told me, like it was evidence that my sister was doing better. She started posting happy pictures again. She started talking about growth. She started acting like the past was just a misunderstanding. Then, one evening, she messaged me a photo of herself with my kid from my parents' dinner years ago. That one moment before everything blew up. She wrote, see? We were fine. That was it. Like the proof of our relationship was one random photo. Like the months of harassment and the public posts and the parking lot ambush didn't exist. I stared at the photo and felt this anger rise up like a wave. Then I felt something else. Softer. Pity. Because she really believed her own edits. I didn't respond. I just saved the screenshot and put my phone down. A few days later, she showed up at my door. Not banging, not screaming, just standing there with a bag, like she was delivering a peace offering. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. My husband was home, thank God. He stood behind me like a wall. I opened the door just enough to look at her. She smiled and said, "Can I come in?" I said no. Her smile tightened. Seriously? She said. After all this time? I said. You still haven't apologized. She huffed, like I was being ridiculous. I said I was stressed, she said. I said I was going through stuff. I said, that's not an apology. She looked past me into the house like she was trying to see my kid. I brought gifts, she said. My husband said, calm and firm, this isn't happening. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just stood there and made it clear we weren't negotiating. My sister's eyes flicked to him and she said, this is what I mean. He controls everything. My husband didn't even blink. He said, you're not coming in. Please leave. My sister's face reddened. She took a step forward like she might push. My husband stepped closer to the door, not touching her, but blocking. My sister stopped and stared, like she suddenly realized the world wasn't going to bend. She lowered her voice and said, you're really going to do this? Keep me from my own family? I said, my family is inside this house, the one I built. You can be part of it when you can act like one. She stared at me for a long second, and I saw something in her face that looked almost like shame. Almost. Then she snapped it away and said, whatever. She shoved the bag into my hands like it was garbage and said, keep it. I tried. Then she walked away. I set the bag on the floor and stared at it like it was a bomb. My husband picked it up, walked it to the trash, and tossed it in without opening it. I started to protest, but then I stopped. Because honestly, I didn't want those gifts. I wanted accountability, and gifts can't replace that. That night, I lay awake thinking about how many times my sister had tried to rewrite the story, how many times she'd tried to change the ending without doing the hard part in the middle, and I realized something that hurt, but also freed me. She didn't want repair. She wanted access. She wanted the picture. She wanted the role. She didn't want the responsibility. So I stopped waiting for her. My mother slowly got better at respecting it. Not perfect. She'd still sigh sometimes and say, it's sad. And it is sad. But she stopped pressuring me as hard. She started saying things like, I wish it was different, instead of, you need to fix it. My father stayed steady. He stopped taking calls from my sister when she started yelling. He ended conversations when she got manipulative. He started choosing peace too, not by giving in, but by refusing to participate. And me? I got used to being the villain in my sister's story. I stopped trying to audition for the role of the good sister. I stopped explaining myself to people who liked drama more than truth. I stopped letting my mother's sadness be a leash around my neck. I still have moments where something hits me out of nowhere, like when I see two sisters laughing in line at a coffee shop, or when a holiday photo pops up on a social media app, and I remember what it felt like to think we could be normal. I feel it. I let it be sad. Then I go home to my loud little life, the one with toys on the floor and dishes in the sink, and a kid who wants to be carried for no reason other than love. And if someone ever asks me, would you do it differently? I don't say some noble speech. I don't say some dramatic lesson. I just say the truth. I would have stopped swallowing it sooner. I would have stopped trying to buy peace with my own comfort. I would have learned earlier that being the bigger person doesn't mean being the flatter person. Because I'm not flat anymore. I'm not quiet anymore. I'm not available for anyone's fantasy where I exist to fix them. I'm just a woman who got married in a modest little ceremony, saved what she could, built a home the slow way, and learned that sometimes the price of peace is being willing to disappoint people who only feel okay when you're the one hurting. I should mention that during all of this, the therapy, the boundaries, the growing peace, there was also the money thing that kept popping up like a bad smell. Because once my sister decided I was the one with everything, she started treating my life like it was a public resource. If my parents visited me, she'd text my mother, must be nice. If my mother bought my kid a birthday gift, my sister would say, so you can spoil her, but you can't help me. Like love was a limited supply. Like my kid's toy was personally stolen from her pantry. One afternoon, my mother showed up at my house with that nervous smile and said, don't get mad. That sentence has never ended well in the history of mothers. She told me my sister had asked if she could use my parents' address to receive mail, just until things settle. I said, why? My mother shrugged and said, she says she's moving. I asked where. My mother didn't know. My sister hadn't said. She just wanted the address. I immediately thought about bills, collections, random chaos, and my parents getting dragged into something again. I said, no. My mother said, it's just mail. I said, it's never just mail. My mother sighed and said, you assume the worst. I said, I assume the pattern. My mother tried to argue, but my father called her while she was in my driveway. I could hear his voice through the phone even though I wasn't the one holding it. He said, sharp, "Stop asking her. We already said no." My mother's shoulders dropped. She looked embarrassed. She said, quietly, "Okay." Then she looked at me and said, "I hate being in the middle." And I almost said, "You put yourself there." But I didn't. I just said, "Me too." A few weeks later, my sister tried another variation. She asked my mother to ask me for a cosign on an apartment. A cosign. Like I was going to attach my name to her chaos and just hope for the best. My mother called me and started the sentence like, "I know you're going to say no, but..." And I cut her off and said no. My mother said, "She says she has a plan." I said her plan is always someone else's safety net. My mother got quiet. Then she said, "You used to be softer." And that stung, because she meant it as criticism, but it was also true. I used to be softer. I used to bend so everyone else could stay comfortable. I said, "I used to think softness was my job." My mother whispered, "I'm just scared for her." I said, "I'm scared too. I'm just not sacrificing my kid because you're scared." That was the first time I heard my mother actually admit out loud that she was afraid of my sister. Not afraid in a physical sense. Afraid of her emotions, her blow-ups, her punishment. Afraid of what would happen if she didn't give her what she wanted. I realized my mother wasn't just enabling my sister because she loved her. She was enabling her because she didn't know how to survive her. And that's when I finally understood why my childhood felt like it did. My sister would rage, my mother would soothe, my father would shut down, and I would shrink to fit the space left over. I had been trained to be low maintenance, to be the easy one, to not add to the fire. So when I finally stopped shrinking, it felt like betrayal to them, like I was breaking an unspoken deal. My husband pushed me to talk to someone, not because he thought I was broken, but because he could see I was carrying too much. I found a therapist through my insurance, and I sat on a couch in a small office and cried about money and weddings and how much I hated the phrase, "be the bigger person." The therapist said, "Being the bigger person often means being the quieter target." I stared at her and said, "Exactly." It was the first time I felt seen by someone who wasn't already tangled in the family web. Therapy didn't fix my sister. It didn't fix my mother's hope, but it helped me stop spiraling. My kid, oblivious to all of it, started calling my father Papa and making him laugh with nonsense stories about talking dinosaurs. Watching my father on the floor playing blocks, I realized this was the family that mattered. It helped me stop checking my phone like it was going to bite. It helped me stop feeling guilty for needing space. It helped me accept that you can love people and still not let them into your home. Around the same time, my father started changing too. Not in a dramatic way, in small, stubborn ways. He stopped giving my sister money. He stopped letting her talk over him. When she started blaming me on the phone, he'd say, "I'm not discussing your sister," and end the call. My mother would get upset and say, "You're making it worse." And my father would say, "It's already worse. I'm just done pretending it isn't." My sister responded by punishing him. She stopped calling him on his birthday. She ignored him on holidays. She told people he was cold and heartless. It hurt him. I could tell it hurt him. But he kept the boundary anyway. Seeing that made me feel both proud and angry. Proud that he was finally stepping up. Angry that it took all this for him to do it. The last big flare-up happened when my kid was old enough to understand words. My sister posted something online about a child being used as a weapon, and my kid was sitting on the couch near me, humming, playing with blocks, and my mother called in tears because relatives were asking questions again. I hung up and I just stared at my kid and thought, no. Not just no to my sister, but no to the whole cycle. No more explaining, no more defending, no more letting other people's discomfort dictate my choices. I sent one message to the group chat with the relatives who kept poking at it. I didn't write a novel. I wrote, "I'm not discussing my sister online. Please stop asking. If you have a relationship with her, keep it with her." Then I muted the chat. My hands were shaking when I hit mute. Then I felt calm. For the first time, I chose silence as protection, not as surrender. After that, the drama didn't vanish. My sister still existed. My mother still wished for a miracle. My aunt still tried to stir things. But my life got louder in a different way. Louder with normal stuff. School forms, doctor appointments, messy kitchen mornings, little arguments with my husband about who forgot to buy snacks. The kind of noise that means you're living, not surviving. And when my sister's name comes up now, it doesn't feel like I'm about to drown. It feels like a sad story that belongs to someone else. Because the truth is, I'm not interested in being the villain in her story anymore. I'm also not interested in being her hero. I'm just interested in being a mother who can breathe in her own house. I don't forgive her the way people like to demand you forgive family. I don't wish her harm either. I wish her therapy. I wish her a life where she stops comparing and starts living. But I also wish her far away from me. That's the part people hate. It's not a reunion. It's not a tearful hug. It's just a boundary that held, year after year, until it became ordinary. And honestly, ordinary felt like a miracle. My kid asks sometimes why there's no auntie in the family photos. I keep it simple. Sometimes people can't be nice, so we keep them at a distance. My kid shrugs and goes back to playing. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's story, I can live with that.